If you ever want to make a stranger run from a blind date in under 10 minutes, Claire Bennett could have taught a master class. At exactly 7:12 p.m. on a rainy Thursday in Chicago, Claire stood outside a restaurant she could never normally afford, staring at her reflection in the dark glass and wondering if she looked unstable enough. She had spent 45 minutes constructing the outfit with surgical precision. The oversized vintage sweater in a shade that could only be described as unfortunate mustard. Mismatched earrings, one silver hoop and one tiny plastic cactus. Bright lipstick intentionally applied just slightly outside the lines. Shoes that looked practical in the least flattering way possible. The goal was simple. Be memorable for all the wrong reasons. Make him leave first. Her phone buzzed again. Her sister Megan. She didn't need to read the text to know what it said. Probably some variation of "be nice, he's successful," or "please don't sabotage this one." Claire shoved the phone into her bag without checking. Too late. Sabotage was already in motion. She stepped inside the restaurant, where warm amber lighting bounced off polished wood and soft jazz drifted through the air. A hostess in black smiled. "Claire?" "Unfortunately." The hostess gave a polite laugh that Claire suspected was mandatory, and led her toward the back. Every table looked like it belonged in a luxury lifestyle magazine. Couples leaned in close over candlelight. Men in fitted jackets laughed over old fashions. Claire suddenly felt ridiculous. Not because of the plan. Because part of her had almost not gone through with it. "Right this way." Then she saw him. Ethan Mercer sat at the table near the windows, one hand resting beside a glass of water, looking entirely too calm for a man about to endure a social disaster. Claire paused. Megan had said he was nice. She had not said annoyingly attractive. Not in a movie star way. More dangerous than that. Clean cut but effortless. Dark blazer, open collar, no tie. The kind of face that looked better when he wasn't trying. Early 30s, maybe? Relaxed posture. Alert eyes. He stood as she approached. "Claire?" His voice was warm. Steady. "That depends. Are you planning to sell me a timeshare?" A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "No pyramid scheme?" Also no. "Cult recruitment?" "Not tonight." Claire narrowed her eyes. That answer was suspiciously specific. He smiled. Actually smiled. Not fake polite smiling. Genuine amusement. That was unexpected. Claire pulled out her chair and sat down without waiting for him. "Just so we're clear," she said, dropping her bag with a dramatic thud. "I hate blind dates. That makes two of us." She blinked. That wasn't the expected script. "Then why are you here?" "Excellent question." His answer was immediate, but his tone carried something unreadable. Claire leaned back. "Fine. Game on. I should tell you now, I have several deeply concerning personality traits. Helpful transparency. I judge people who order soup in public. Good to know. I once ended a relationship because he pronounced salmon with the L." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "That does feel serious." Claire stared at him. Most men would already be checking for an escape route. "Are you always like this?" she asked. "Like what?" "Calm." "No, that's somehow weirder." A server approached. Ethan gestured politely for Claire to order first. She didn't even glance at the menu. "What's the most overpriced thing here?" The server hesitated. Ethan didn't react. "The ribeye is $68. "Perfect." Claire closed the menu dramatically. "And sparkling water. Imported. Something needlessly expensive." "Of course." When the server left, Ethan folded his hands. "Prepared." "For what?" "Whatever this is." Claire laughed once, short and humorless. "You think this is a joke?" "I think," he said evenly, "you decided before arriving that tonight needed to fail." That landed harder than she expected. Claire crossed her arms. "Maybe I just have excellent instincts." "Maybe. And maybe you should leave while you still can." Ethan glanced toward the rain sliding down the window, then back at her. Do I seem eager to? Claire opened her mouth, then closed it. That wasn't how this worked. Men were supposed to get uncomfortable. Defensive. Irritated. Not curious. Not entertained. She shifted strategies. I should mention I talk too much when nervous, disappear emotionally when things get complicated, and I have a deeply unhealthy relationship with online shopping. That last one may be relatable. I'm serious. So am I. Claire studied him for the first time, really studied him. No smugness. No forced charm. No obvious agenda. That made him harder to read, which made him more suspicious. What do you do? She asked. Work. That's evasive. That's accurate. Are you secretly unemployed? No, married? No, living with 3 emotional support ferrets? Not currently. Claire exhaled sharply through her nose despite herself. He was impossible. And somehow still there. The server returned with drinks. Claire reached for hers, then paused as she noticed something strange. The server addressed Ethan with a subtle familiarity. Respectful, but not casual. Like someone used to seeing him here. Ethan thanked him by name. Claire filed that away. Interesting. Maybe he was a regular. Maybe he was pretending to be richer than he was. Maybe Megan had found her another finance bro with podcast opinions. Fine. If phase 1 wasn't enough, phase 2 would be worse. Claire lifted her glass, met Ethan's eyes, and smiled for the first time that night. It was not a kind smile. Just so you know, she said, I haven't even started yet. Ethan leaned back, completely unshaken. Then he smiled too. Good, he said. I was hoping this would get interesting. Claire should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt annoyed. Men were predictable. That was one of the few rules in her life she trusted. Push a little too hard, be inconvenient, say something socially alarming, and eventually they found an excuse to leave. Ethan Mercer, apparently, had missed the orientation packet. Claire took another sip of imported sparkling water and studied him over the rim of the glass. He looked entirely comfortable, which was frankly offensive. So, she said, tilting her head, tell me why a man who willingly attends blind dates should be considered emotionally stable. Ethan folded his napkin with absurd calm. I was told the woman I was meeting was intelligent, independent, and had strong opinions. Claire gave a dry laugh. That sounds like marketing language for difficult. Maybe. And you still came. I did. That says concerning things about your judgment. Possibly. She narrowed her eyes. He was doing that thing again, agreeing just enough to remove all momentum from her attacks. It was infuriating. Fine, she said. You want honesty? I prefer it. I almost canceled 3 times. Only 3? I considered pretending to have food poisoning. Classic. I thought about asking my coworker to text me with a fake emergency. Creative. At one point, I considered temporarily moving to another state. Ethan smiled. That feels logistically ambitious for a Thursday. Claire hated that she almost smiled back. Almost. You think this is charming? She asked. No, good. I think it is honest. That word again. Honest. As if she was doing him some kind of favor. The server arrived with bread service, setting down a basket between them. Claire immediately pushed it away. Carbs make me suspicious. Of what? Ethan asked. False hope. Ethan let out a quiet laugh, and somehow it sounded real. Not performative. Claire checked her phone, partly to avoid noticing that. A new message from Megan. Did you get there? Please behave like a functioning adult. Claire locked the screen. Bad news? Ethan asked. Family. That explains the expression. Claire looked up sharply. What expression? The one that says you would rather explain tax law to toddlers than answer that text. She stared at him. You are weirdly observant. Occupational hazard. Which occupation? Still working. You really enjoy being evasive. You really enjoy interrogation. That is because you are suspicious. Because I came to dinner? Because you are calm. That is not usually listed as suspicious behavior. Claire leaned forward. It is when someone is this calm while being deliberately provoked. Ethan held her gaze. And yet here we are. For a moment, something shifted. The restaurant noise blurred slightly around her. The jazz. The clink of silverware. Rain against the windows. Claire broke eye contact first and hated that too. You know what? She said, reaching for her menu again. I think I should make this much worse. I had assumed that was the plan. You have no idea. She ordered dessert before dinner. 2 of them. One involving chocolate and something flambéed that sounded absurdly expensive. Ethan did not blink. You are not even pretending to object? She asked after the server walked away. Should I? Most men would make some comment. About dessert? About cost. It is dessert, Claire. Not a used car. That caught her off guard. You do realize some people budget carefully. Of course. And if ordering dessert is your chosen act of rebellion, I support your vision. Claire sat back, momentarily speechless. This was not how sabotage was supposed to work. Then Ethan glanced at her wrist. That is an interesting bracelet. Instinctively, Claire touched it. Thin silver, slightly tarnished. It was my mother's. The answer slipped out before she could stop it. Ethan nodded once. No dramatic reaction. No awkward sympathy. Just acknowledgement. Claire immediately redirected. Do not think one accidental personal detail means progress. Understood. I am still an excellent bad decision. That remains to be seen. You say that like you are evaluating me. Maybe I am. For what? Ethan took a sip of water before answering. I have not decided yet. Claire frowned. That should have sounded arrogant. Instead, it sounded curious. Like he genuinely meant it. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time it was not Megan. It was her landlord. Reminder, rent due tomorrow. Claire locked the screen so quickly she nearly dropped the phone. Her stomach tightened. Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. Everything okay? Perfect, she said too quickly. That sounded convincing. Good. It was not. Claire exhaled. Why are you still here? She asked, quieter this time. That seems to be bothering you. Because I do not understand it. Ethan glanced toward the rain-soaked street outside, then back at her. Not everything needs immediate explanation. Claire opened her mouth to argue, but the server returned with the desserts she had ordered far too early. As the plates were set down, the server gave Ethan another one of those subtle respectful nods, almost deferential this time. Claire caught it again. Definitely not normal. She looked from the server to Ethan, then back. Okay, she said slowly. That is twice now. Ethan picked up his fork. What is that? Helpful specificity. The staff acting like you either own this place or secretly judge their performance reviews. Ethan almost smiled. Interesting theory. Claire leaned in. Who exactly are you? Ethan cut a small piece of dessert, completely unhurried. Then he looked up. Tonight? He said. Just a man having dessert before dinner with a woman determined to scare him away. Claire stared at him, trying to decide whether Ethan Mercer was genuinely mysterious or just professionally irritating. That is not an answer, she said. It was an answer, Ethan replied, taking another bite of dessert with the calm of a man who had never once been rushed by life. It just was not the one you wanted. Claire folded her arms. Do you always do this? Eat dessert before dinner? Deflect. Only when interrogated without legal representation. She let out an involuntary breath that was dangerously close to a laugh. This had become unacceptable. The entire evening had drifted so far off her intended path that she barely recognized the terrain. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Be unpleasant. Be exhausting. End the night early. Instead, she was sitting across from a man who treated her sabotage like an interesting social experiment. Fine. Escalation it was. Claire reached for her phone, unlocked it, and frowned dramatically. Oh no. Ethan glanced up. Emergency? Potentially. Claire tilted the screen toward herself as if reading something urgent. My friend Tessa may have adopted a rescue parrot with separation anxiety. Ethan blinked once. That sounds specific. The bird apparently hates men named Kevin. That is unfortunate for Kevin. You are not taking this seriously. I am trying. Claire set the phone down. I might need to leave at any moment. For the parrot? If the emotional situation deteriorates. Ethan nodded solemnly. Naturally. Still no irritation. Still no discomfort. Claire tried another angle. I should also disclose that I once got banned from a trivia night for aggressively defending an incorrect answer. What was the answer? Nebraska. To what question? That is not important. Ethan smiled into his water glass. Claire leaned back and looked toward the rain outside. Chicago shimmered in wet reflections and taillights. She had expected boredom tonight. Maybe mild humiliation. Not this strange, exhausting mental tennis match. Your turn, she said suddenly. Tell me something alarming. About me? Yes. Everyone has something. Ethan considered. I dislike unnecessary meetings. That is barely a personality trait. I reorganize hotel room furniture. Odd. I do not trust people who are rude to service staff. Claire paused. That one landed differently. That sounded pointed. Was it? Maybe. Then perhaps it was effective. Claire sat up straighter. For the record, I am not rude. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Claire glanced toward the server station and mentally reviewed her performance. Demanding, yes. Difficult, certainly. Actually rude? Debatable. I am selectively challenging, she said. Impressive rebrand. The server arrived at that exact moment to ask whether they were ready for dinner. Claire did not even open the menu this time. What is the most complicated thing the kitchen hates making? The server hesitated politely. Ethan covered a smile with his hand. The sea base requires more preparation, the server offered. Perfect. Extra substitutions. Of course. Claire handed back the menu with theatrical satisfaction. After the server left, Ethan asked, Do you enjoy chaos? I enjoy testing people. Why? Because people perform on first dates. And you prefer authenticity. I prefer honesty, Claire said, then immediately hated the irony. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. Interesting. Do not do that. Do what? That thing where you make one word sound psychologically significant. Maybe it is. Claire checked her phone again. No new messages. Rent due tomorrow still echoed in her mind anyway. She mentally calculated what was in her checking account. Then immediately regretted it. Not enough. Definitely not enough. You disappeared for a second, Ethan said. I am right here. Physically. That counts. Not always. Claire looked at him sharply. Do you do this professionally? Do what? Read people. Sometimes. That is somehow more suspicious than saying nothing. A couple at the next table laughed loudly over champagne. Claire noticed how effortlessly they seemed to fit together, all polished ease and shared shorthand. It irritated her more than it should have. Let me guess, she said. You are one of those hyper-disciplined morning people who wakes up at 5, drinks green juice, and uses phrases like optimizing outcomes. That sounds exhausting. So that is a no? I do wake up early. Of course you do. But no green juice. Thank goodness. Their dinners arrived, and once again, the server addressed Ethan with that same subtle deference. Not fear. Not exactly admiration. Familiar respect. Claire watched closely this time. Ethan thanked him by first name again. The server smiled like that mattered. Okay, Claire said after he walked away. This is officially weird. The sea base? You. Ethan picked up his fork. A recurring theme. Do you come here all the time? Sometimes. Do you know the staff personally? Some of them. Why? Because I have met them. Claire gave him a flat look. That was deeply unhelpful. I try to stay consistent. She took a bite, then set her fork down. You know what? New strategy. Ethan leaned back slightly. Should I be concerned? Probably. Claire smiled with renewed determination. Because if subtle sabotage is not working, I may need to become unforgettable. Ethan met her gaze, entirely unshaken. Claire, he said evenly, I had already reached that conclusion about 20 minutes ago. Claire should have felt in control after that line. Instead, something deeply inconvenient happened. She became curious. Not interested. Absolutely not charmed. Curious. There was a difference, and she repeated that distinction to herself while cutting into sea base she had ordered mostly out of spite. Ethan Mercer, unfortunately, remained impossible to categorize. Most men tried too hard on first dates. They over-explained jobs, listed hobbies like a resume, laughed too loudly, or performed confidence with the subtlety of a used car commercial. Ethan did none of that. He answered selectively, observed constantly, and somehow managed to make silence feel intentional instead of awkward. Claire hated that. You are doing it again, she said. Ethan looked up from his plate. Doing what? Being mysteriously normal. That sounds contradictory. Exactly. He smiled slightly. A devastating accusation. Claire pointed her fork at him. You have not once tried to impress me. Would that work? No, then that seems efficient. She rolled her eyes, but her attention drifted to his wrist as he reached for his water. The watch was understated. No oversized face, no flashy branding, no desperate attempt to announce status. Just clean, expensive craftsmanship. Claire had no idea what brand it was, but she knew enough to recognize quality. That watch looks expensive, she said. Ethan glanced at it. It was a gift. From? Someone with questionable taste in gifts. Deflection again. Consistency. Claire took another bite, then noticed his phone light up face down beside his plate. He glanced at the screen for less than a second, declined the call, and turned it completely over. Important? She asked. Not tonight. That sounded dramatic. Did it? Yes. Then perhaps I should have sounded less dramatic. A minute later, the phone buzzed again. Same response. Declined immediately. Claire watched him. Persistent. Some people are. Ex-girlfriend? No work crisis? No secret double life? That would be difficult to maintain with proper scheduling. Claire frowned. You joke when avoiding answers. You escalate when uncomfortable. I am not uncomfortable. Ethan lifted one eyebrow in a way that was somehow more effective than a full argument. Claire ignored that and looked around the restaurant instead. Then she noticed something else. A man in a tailored charcoal suit near the bar made eye contact with Ethan. Not casually. More like recognition. Ethan gave a subtle nod, and the man immediately looked away, as if that brief acknowledgement had completed some invisible protocol. Claire stared. What was that? What was what? Ethan asked. That weird eye contact thing. I made eye contact. Do not simplify suspicious behavior. Ethan took another bite of dinner like this conversation was perfectly ordinary. Claire leaned back, replaying the evening. The staff knew him. People noticed him. His phone received persistent calls he ignored without concern. His clothes looked expensive without trying to look expensive. He answered questions like someone used to controlling conversations without appearing controlling. You are not in finance, are you? She asked. Why finance? Because they all have the same unsettling confidence. Harsh. Accurate. No law? No politics? Definitely no. Technology? Ethan smiled but said nothing. Claire pointed accusingly. That reaction means something. Or it means I am enjoying this guessing game. That is not reassuring. Her phone buzzed again. Megan this time. Claire finally checked it. How is it going? Is he normal? Claire stared at the message, then typed back before she could overthink it. Define normal. She regretted sending it instantly. Ethan noticed the expression shift. Let me guess, he said. Family audit? You are alarmingly good at guessing. Experience. Big family? Not exactly. That sounds like another answer designed to reveal nothing. You are catching on. The server returned to clear plates, and before Claire could stop herself, she watched the interaction carefully. Everything excellent this evening, Mr. Mercer? The server asked. Mr. Mercer. Not Ethan. Not sir. Something in between formal and familiar. Ethan thanked him quietly. Claire froze. She waited until the server left, then leaned forward. Okay. Ethan folded his hands. Okay? That was different. In what way? He called you Mr. Mercer. That is my name. You know exactly what I mean. Ethan said nothing. Claire narrowed her eyes. Do you own this restaurant? No, do you invest in restaurants? Interesting leap. Do you? Claire. That is not an answer. Correct. She stared at him, frustration mixing with something far more dangerous, intrigue. This was no longer just sabotage. It had become a puzzle, and Claire had always been terrible at walking away from puzzles. Then a sharply dressed woman in her 50s passed their table on her way out, paused for half a second, and smiled directly at Ethan. Good evening, Mr. Mercer. Ethan nodded politely. Good evening. The woman continued walking. Claire slowly turned back toward him. Who are you? She asked again, quieter this time. Ethan held her gaze for a moment, then reached for his water. Someone, he said evenly, who is starting to think your terrible first date strategy may actually be very effective. Claire blinked. What does that mean? Ethan set the glass down. It means, he said, with that infuriating calm expression, I have no idea what you are going to do next. Claire should have left the mystery alone. A reasonable person would have. A reasonable person would have accepted that Ethan Mercer was odd, politely finished dinner, and gone home to complain to her sister. Claire, unfortunately, had never been especially committed to being reasonable. You know what? She said, setting down her fork. I do know what I am going to do next. Ethan looked mildly interested. Should I prepare? Absolutely. Claire sat up straighter, committing fully to the most reckless version of herself. If curiosity was making her hesitate, embarrassment would fix that. I am going to become significantly worse. Ambitious. Do not encourage me. Too late. Claire signaled the server with far more confidence than she felt. Can I help with anything? He asked politely. Yes, Claire said. I have a very important question. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to know whether your tiramisu is emotionally restorative, what would you say? The server blinked. I would say many guests enjoy it. Excellent. Add one. Ethan rubbed a hand across his jaw, clearly suppressing amusement. Dessert number 3? I believe in layered decision-making. Naturally. Claire turned back toward the server. Also, does this place allow spontaneous singing? I am sorry. Not actual singing, Claire said. That sounded more alarming than intended. I had assumed. The server escaped with admirable professionalism. Ethan looked at her for a moment. This feels less like sabotage and more like performance art. I contain multitudes. That explains several things. Claire checked her phone again. No miracles. Rent was still due tomorrow. Her checking account was still depressing. The contrast between her financial reality and this absurd restaurant suddenly made her feel reckless in a different way. Tell me something, she said. How often do you eat in places like this? Sometimes. That means often. Your interpretation is aggressive. Correct me, then. Ethan tilted his head. Why does it matter? Claire almost gave a sarcastic answer, but something sharper came out instead. Because some people think $80 dinners are normal, and some people calculate whether buying coffee this week was irresponsible. Silence settled for half a second. Ethan did not rush to fill it. That sounds specific, he said finally. Claire immediately regretted saying it. Forget it. I do not think I should. I definitely think you should. Before he could respond, a familiar voice cut through the room. Claire? Her stomach dropped. She turned. Of course. Of all possible people in Chicago, it had to be Rachel Donnelly. Former co-worker. Relentlessly polished. The kind of woman who somehow made networking feel like a personality trait. Rachel stood beside the table in a camel coat, holding a designer handbag Claire recognized from a magazine and could never afford. Wow, Rachel said, smiling too brightly. I almost did not recognize you. Translation: what happened to your outfit? Claire forced a smile. Rachel. Hi. Rachel glanced at Ethan, then back at Claire with unmistakable curiosity. Did not know you had plans here. Claire could already feel judgment forming in real time. Last minute thing. Rachel smiled at Ethan. Hi, I am Rachel. Ethan stood politely. Ethan. Rachel froze. Just for a fraction of a second, but Claire saw it. Recognition. Real recognition. Rachel's expression shifted so subtly most people would miss it. Claire did not. Ethan Mercer? Rachel asked. Ethan gave a small nod. Good evening. Rachel actually laughed once, a surprised breath of disbelief. Well, that is unexpected. Claire looked between them. You know each other? Rachel turned to her, suddenly wearing a completely different expression. Claire. A pause. You do know who this is, right? Claire's entire body went still. Ethan said nothing. Rachel looked almost entertained now. I mean, I assumed obviously you knew. Claire felt heat rise into her face. Rachel, what are you talking about? Rachel adjusted her bag. Your date. Another glance at Ethan. Mercer Technologies? Claire stared blankly. Rachel continued, because apparently the universe hated her. The Mercer Foundation? The business journals? The interviews? That Mercer? The room did not physically change, but Claire felt like the oxygen had shifted anyway. She slowly turned toward Ethan. He looked exactly the same. Calm. Composed. Infuriatingly unreadable. That is not funny, Claire said. Rachel looked confused. I am not joking. Claire gave a short laugh that sounded nothing like amusement. No. Absolutely not. Rachel blinked. Claire. Claire looked at Ethan. You are telling me this is some weird coincidence? Ethan exhaled slowly. Rachel glanced between them and suddenly seemed to realize she had detonated something. I should probably. She began. Yes, Claire said quickly. Rachel gave Ethan an awkward nod and disappeared toward the exit. Claire sat perfectly still for 2 full seconds. Then she looked back at Ethan. Tell me, she said carefully, that Rachel is catastrophically misinformed. Ethan met her gaze. Said nothing. Claire laughed again, this time because the alternative was collapsing into the floor. Oh no, she whispered. What exactly have I been doing all night? Claire wanted Rachel to come back and announce it was an elaborate misunderstanding. A name mix-up. A wildly inaccurate assumption. Anything. Instead, Rachel was gone, the rain still tapped against the windows, dessert sat half-finished between them, and Ethan Mercer remained impossibly calm. Which, Claire now realized, might have been the most suspicious thing about him from the beginning. Say something, Claire said. Ethan held her gaze. Rachel was not wrong. The words landed with humiliating precision. Claire sat back so quickly her chair shifted against the floor. No, Ethan said nothing. No, because that would mean I have spent the last 3 hours aggressively interrogating, financially sabotaging, and psychologically stress testing someone whose name apparently appears in business magazines. Closer to 2 hours, Ethan said. Claire stared at him. That is the part you are correcting? Accuracy matters. Oh, that is incredible. She laughed once, but her face burned. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this is? Some idea. Why did you not say anything? You did not ask the right question. Claire nearly choked on the logic. I asked what you did, and I said I worked. That is not an answer. Technically it is. That is infuriating. I am aware. Claire pressed both hands against her forehead. Every strange detail replayed with brutal clarity. The staff recognition. The calls. The watch. Rachel's reaction. The way Ethan moved through the evening with zero anxiety because apparently men who ran billion-dollar companies did not panic over awkward first dates. This cannot be real, she muttered. It is very real. Did my sister know? I assume so. Claire groaned. Megan is never going to let me survive this. That does seem possible. She looked up sharply. You are enjoying this. Ethan considered the accusation. Not the embarrassment. That sounds suspiciously selective. I am enjoying your honesty. Claire blinked. My honesty? You have been exactly who you are all evening. I have been a disaster. That is one interpretation. What is yours? Ethan leaned back slightly, studying her with a level calm that somehow made her more nervous now than before. Unexpected. Claire gave a short, incredulous laugh. You could date literally anyone. That is a strange sentence. Is it inaccurate? Ethan did not answer immediately. It is incomplete. Oh, excellent. Mysterious billionaire philosophy. Claire. The way he said her name stopped her for half a second. Not dramatic. Just steady. Do you think most people act normally around me? Once they know who I am. She opened her mouth, then stopped. That is not the point. It is part of the point. Claire looked away. I ordered dessert before dinner. Yes. I invented an emergency involving a rescue parrot. I remember. I may have implied you were secretly unemployed. That also happened. And you still stayed. Ethan nodded once. Yes. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Because for the first time in a long time, I was not having the same conversation. Claire frowned. What does that mean? It means most first dates become predictable very quickly. Because women recognize you? Sometimes. And then? Ethan looked toward the rain-dark windows. Then they become careful. Claire absorbed that. Careful how? Polished. Agreeable. Curious in very specific ways. Money-specific ways? Ethan glanced back at her. Occasionally. Claire looked down at the table. That landed harder than she expected. I am sorry, she said before she could stop herself. Ethan's expression shifted slightly. For what? For assuming things. You did not know. Still. Ethan was quiet. Claire. What? You are the only person who has ever tried to frighten me away with fictional bird emergencies and aggressive dessert ordering. Against all logic, she laughed. A real laugh this time. Small, unwilling, but real. That is not exactly flattering. I disagree. You have strange standards. That has been established. Her phone buzzed again. Rent due tomorrow. The humiliation of the evening collided violently with her actual life, and suddenly the absurdity was overwhelming. This is ridiculous, she said quietly. Which part? All of it. She gestured vaguely between them. You. This place. My life. I cannot even pay my rent tomorrow, and somehow I am sitting here finding out I accidentally bullied a billionaire overseas base. Silence. Ethan looked at her differently then. Not amused. Not analytical. Just attentive. You cannot pay your rent? Claire instantly regretted saying it. Forget I said that. Claire. No. She shook her head. Absolutely not. We are not doing that thing where this becomes some humiliating pity subplot. I was asking a question. Well, do not. Ethan leaned back, giving her space instead of pushing. Somehow that made it worse. Claire stood abruptly. I should leave. Ethan looked up. Because you are embarrassed? That would be a strong contributing factor. Or because now you know who I am? Claire met his eyes. I honestly do not know which answer would make me look worse. Ethan stood too, calm as ever. Then perhaps either is the real reason. Claire opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Because the part she hated most was this: now that the truth was out, she still did not want to leave. Claire slowly sat back down, which somehow felt more emotionally revealing than anything she had said all evening. Ethan remained standing for half a second, as if making sure the decision was real, then returned to his seat with the same calm precision that had irritated her from the beginning. I hate that I am still here, Claire said. That seems only partially true. Do not become insightful now. I make no promises. Claire looked at him across the table, the absurdity of the night rearranging itself into something she could no longer dismiss as a joke. So what exactly is this? She asked. A social experiment? No, an amusing story for your board meetings? Definitely not. Then what? Ethan was quiet for a moment. An honest evening. Claire let out a dry laugh. That is a generous interpretation. I mean it. Why? She asked. Because I was honest about being difficult? Because you were not trying to be impressive. I was trying to be intolerable. Exactly. Claire stared at him. That makes no sense. It makes more sense than you think. He glanced down briefly, then back at her. Do you know how many times I have sat across from someone who had already researched my life before ordering water? Claire said nothing. How many times conversations become interviews? He continued. Or strategic performances? That sounds dramatic. It is accurate. So your solution was to hide who you are? Sometimes. That seems unhealthy. Perhaps. Claire folded her arms. And tonight? Ethan exhaled. Tonight my sister arranged this. Claire blinked. You have a meddling sister too? Aggressively optimistic. That tracks. She said I needed to meet someone normal. Claire looked around herself. You have a fascinating definition of normal. Ethan almost smiled. She said someone real? That landed differently. Claire looked down at the bracelet on her wrist, turning it absent-mindedly with her thumb. Real is overrated. You do not believe that. You know me for 2 hours. Long enough to disagree. Claire should have resisted. Instead, she asked the question she had been avoiding. Did you know who I was? Only your name. Nothing else? My sister said you worked in nonprofit administration, that you were intelligent, and that I should not be late. Claire gave a short laugh. That sounds like Megan. So no, Ethan said. I did not know your financial situation. Your family dynamics. Your opinions about fictional parrots. Claire looked away. That rent comment was a mistake. Why? Because now I sound like someone trying to manipulate your sympathy. Is that what you were doing? No, then why assume that is what I think? Claire did not answer. Ethan waited. No pressure. No interruption. Just patience, which somehow made honesty harder to avoid. Because, she said finally, people change when money enters a conversation. Ethan's expression shifted slightly. That is true. And I am not interested in becoming some tragic anecdote. Claire. I mean it. She looked directly at him now. I have spent enough time around people who hear one vulnerable detail and suddenly start treating you differently. Softer voice. Careful expressions. Offers you did not ask for. It is humiliating. Ethan nodded once. That sounds familiar. From your side? Different version. Same principle. Claire frowned. Meaning? People decide who you are before speaking to you. Because you are wealthy. Because they think they understand wealth. She considered that. That sounds lonely. Ethan gave a small, almost surprised smile. That was unexpectedly direct. I am trying something new called honesty, apparently. I noticed. Claire hesitated. Why the blind date, really? Ethan was quiet for several seconds. Because. My sister insisted I had become impossible. Have you? Possibly. And now? Now I am having dinner with a woman who attempted strategic social sabotage and accidentally made me laugh 3 times. Claire pointed at him. That count feels suspiciously specific. I pay attention. She shook her head, but the tension in her shoulders had shifted. Less defensive. More uncertain. You realize this changes everything. Does it? Yes. How? Claire opened her mouth and stopped. That was the problem. She did not know. Exactly. Ethan said gently. You are still the same person who walked in here in mismatched earrings. Those were intentional. I assumed. And you are still. She gestured vaguely. Whatever this is. That is less flattering than you think. Claire smiled despite herself. Then her phone buzzed again. Megan. Claire ignored it. Ethan noticed. No family audit? I cannot emotionally survive that conversation yet. Reasonable. The check arrived without being requested. Claire stared at it like it might explode. Ethan reached for it automatically. No, Claire said instantly. Claire. No, you ordered 3 desserts. That is not the point. What is the point? I am not letting this become weird. Ethan studied her for a moment, then set the check back down. All right. Claire blinked. That easy? You said no? That has not stopped other people before. Ethan leaned back. I am not other people. The words settled between them. Simple. Unforced. Claire looked at him differently then, not because of Rachel's revelation or the impossible bank account attached to his name, but because for the first time all evening, she believed him. Claire had no practical explanation for what happened next, because sensible people did not voluntarily continue first dates that had included strategic sabotage, accidental emotional honesty, and the surprise revelation that one participant appeared regularly in financial publications. Yet somehow, 40 minutes later, she was standing outside the restaurant beneath the awning while rain softened from a steady downpour into a misty drizzle, still talking to Ethan Mercer like the evening had not already exceeded all reasonable expectations. This officially qualifies as the strangest night of my year, Claire said, wrapping her arms against the cold. Only your year? Ethan asked. Do not get ambitious. He smiled, and Claire noticed something she had missed earlier. Without the restaurant around them, without staff quietly recognizing him or formal lighting making everything feel staged, he looked less untouchable. Still composed. Still unmistakably confident. But more human somehow. I should go home, Claire said. Probably. That was suspiciously easy. You said honesty? True. She glanced toward the curb where rideshare headlights passed in wet streaks. So this is where normal people say goodnight, right? I believe that is the traditional sequence. And then never mention the dessert incident again. That may be contractually impossible. Claire laughed despite herself. Then her phone rang. Megan. Again. Claire stared at the screen. If that is family, Ethan said, I support strategic avoidance. That is exactly family. Impressive consistency. Claire answered before Megan escalated to repeated calls. What? Megan launched in immediately. What do you mean define normal? Claire, I have been refreshing my messages for 2 hours. Are you alive? Claire closed her eyes. Unfortunately. How is it going? Claire glanced at Ethan, who was politely pretending not to listen while very obviously hearing everything. Complicated. Complicated good or complicated restraining order paperwork? Megan. Claire. she exhaled. I will call you tomorrow. Wait. Did you find out? Claire froze. Find out what? Megan went silent for exactly one beat too long. Megan. I assumed you knew. Claire laughed toward the night sky. Of course you did. Ethan looked suspiciously unsurprised. You set me up with a billionaire and forgot that detail? Megan sounded offended. I did not forget. I strategically omitted. That is called withholding information. I wanted you to meet the person, not the profile. Claire looked at Ethan. That appears to be a family strategy. Ethan gave a small nod. Confirmed. I hate both of you, Claire muttered. Megan gasped. Theatrically. You do not hate me. Also, is he there? Good night, Megan. Claire ended the call before further damage occurred. Ethan looked almost amused. Strategically omitted? Apparently manipulation runs in the bloodline. My condolences. A taxi splashed past. Claire checked the time. It was much later than she realized. I really do need to go. I know. And before you say anything, I can get home myself. I had not said anything. You were thinking something expensive and courteous. That is an unfair assumption. Is it? Ethan considered. No. Claire smiled. Thought so. There was a brief pause, not awkward exactly, just uncertain in a way the earlier conversation had not been. Claire looked at him. This is the weird part. Which weird part? The one where I do not know what happens next. Ethan nodded slightly. That is fair. I am not suddenly becoming one of those women who starts researching yacht ownership. Reassuring. And you are not allowed to become weirdly generous because I accidentally confessed financial stress. Understood. Good. Another pause. Then Ethan asked, would you consider a second first date? Claire blinked. That is not a real category. It should be. Define terms. A date where neither of us arrives under misleading emotional conditions. That is very corporate phrasing. Occupational hazard. Claire looked down, then back up. No sabotage? Preferably. No hidden billionaire reveals? I can disclose that one in advance. Tempting. Ethan waited. No pressure. Just the same steady patience that somehow no longer irritated her. Maybe, Claire said. That is not a no. That is not a yes. Progress. Claire shook her head. You are annoyingly calm. You mentioned that. Repeatedly. A rideshare finally pulled up to the curb with her name in the app window. Claire opened the rear door, then paused. Ethan? Yes? For the record, the mismatched earrings were intentional. I never doubted that. And the parrot emergency was fictional. Devastating. Claire smiled, then stopped herself from overthinking what happened next. Maybe I will see you again. Ethan met her gaze. I think you will. She got into the car before she could analyze that answer. As they pulled away, Claire looked back once through the rain-specked glass. Ethan was still standing under the awning, hands in his coat pockets, watching the car disappear into traffic like a man entirely certain the story was not over. And the part Claire hated admitting was this: for the first time all night, she hoped he was right. Claire fully expected never to hear from Ethan Mercer again. Not because he had given any indication of losing interest, but because reality tended to reassert itself eventually. Strange magical evenings belonged in stories people exaggerated over brunch, not in actual adult life where rent was due, inboxes multiplied overnight, and embarrassment had a long memory. Which was why, at 8:14 the next morning, when her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, Claire nearly ignored it. Then she opened it. Good morning. No parrots were harmed overnight. Claire laughed so suddenly she startled herself in her kitchen. Her apartment was exactly as unglamorous as ever. Narrow galley kitchen. Radiator that clicked unpredictably. Coffee she bought because it was on sale. Somehow the contrast made the message funnier. She typed back before overthinking. Still emotionally recovering from dessert decisions. The response came almost immediately. Encouraging resilience. Claire stared at the screen longer than she should have. Megan called 20 minutes later, naturally insufferable. So? Her sister demanded. So what? Do not do that. Claire poured coffee. I survived. That is not what I asked. You strategically omitted relevant billionaire information. I strategically created possibility. You are exhausting. Megan lowered her voice theatrically. Are you seeing him again? Claire looked at the message thread still open on her counter. Maybe. Megan made a sound usually associated with dramatic television reveals. That is not a denial. Goodbye, Megan. 3 days later, Claire found herself standing outside a neighborhood bookstore cafe wearing normal earrings. Not because Ethan had asked. Because she had chosen them. That distinction mattered to her more than she wanted to admit. The second first date, as Ethan insisted on calling it, was aggressively ordinary by design. No luxury restaurant. No hidden identities. No strategic emotional sabotage. Just coffee, books, and a quiet Saturday afternoon. Ethan was already there when she arrived, reading something by the window. He looked up, smiled, and Claire experienced the deeply inconvenient realization that she was genuinely happy to see him. You came, he said. I enjoy proving my own bad judgment. Consistent. Do not get comfortable. But something had changed. Conversation came easier now. Less defensive. More curious. Claire learned Ethan hated small talk but loved architecture. That he had an embarrassing loyalty to an old baseball team his father supported. That he preferred simple restaurants over performative luxury. That he genuinely reorganized hotel furniture. Ethan learned Claire cried at animal rescue commercials, secretly loved crossword puzzles, and had once gotten into a prolonged argument with a parking meter attendant over unclear signage. That sounds exactly right, Ethan said. Weeks passed. Then months. Slowly, inconveniently steadily. Ethan never treated Claire like a project. Never solved problems she had not asked him to solve. Never turned kindness into leverage. When Claire mentioned she was stressed, he listened. When she said no, he respected it the first time. When life became messy, he stayed calm without becoming distant. It was unfamiliar enough to be unsettling at first. Then reassuring. One evening in early fall, Claire arrived at a small charity event her organization was hosting and nearly turned around when she saw the guest list set up. Donors. Sponsors. Media. Everything she hated. Ethan noticed immediately. You look like you are considering escape. Strong possibility. Need a fictional parrot emergency? Claire laughed. That joke is never going away, is it? Absolutely not. Later that evening, while balancing sparkling water and trying not to look awkward near a display table, Claire overheard two guests discussing Ethan and the tone people reserved for public figures. Wealth estimates. Acquisitions. Headlines. The old. Discomfort flickered briefly. Ethan walked over, took one look at her expression, and quietly asked, Do you want to leave? Not because the event was his. Not because it would be inconvenient. Just because she looked overwhelmed. That was the moment something settled in Claire with unusual clarity. Not the restaurant reveal. Not the bookstore date. Not even the countless quiet conversations in between. That moment. The simple one. Months later, on another rainy evening in Chicago, Claire and Ethan passed the same restaurant where their first disastrous meeting had happened. Claire stopped under the awning and looked up at him. You realize I tried very hard to make you leave. I remember. I ordered dessert before dinner. Historic choice. I invented emotional bird trauma. Compelling performance. Claire smiled. You still stayed. Ethan looked at her with that same steady expression from the beginning, only now she understood it better. Yes, he said simply. I did. Claire shook her head. That was objectively terrible judgment. Ethan smiled. Or excellent judgment. Rain tapped softly above them. Claire stepped a little closer. You know what is deeply annoying? Frequently. You were right. About? The story not being over. Ethan's expression